Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Two Chiefs, One Mike podcast. We are in season 2. I'm Mike Hawkins.
And I am Scott Hughes. It's an honor to have this is our first guest who has made not one, not two, but now 3 appearances on the
trifecta.
Chief J. Gerace of the Colony, but it's not spelled that way, New York Police Department is back for the 3rd time on the podcast, Mike. Can you believe it? We have a returning guest.
It's crazy. I was saying before we even started the show, I opened social media this morning, saw an article on the town of Colony. So you're all over the place. And we wanted to bring you back to talk about something. And you brought a special guest with you. So why don't we get right into it? You talk about what you're here for and who you've got with you today.
Yeah, I think my special guest will steal the show. But first, guys, thanks for having me back. I appreciate that. And we left it at the last episode, the teaser, if you will, about talking about roll call training. And Scott was just at the end, was talking to us about how to make a better use of our briefing time. And I was like crawling out of my chair to try to explain what we were doing. I was really excited to have some research results. But the short version is last year, from September to December, the Colony Police Department did a program evaluation on a briefing training program that we called microdosing, right? Small doses of training, trying to do a little bit, a lot to try to make our people better. And Sara was our evaluator from the Finn Institute. So I'll kind of let you guys hit it back to her to give her resume here.
So Sara, tell us about the Finn Institute first, and then I can't wait to hear what you thought about your experience with law enforcement training.
Yeah, so the John F. Finn Institute for Public Safety, it's a nonprofit research organization. I started here last March, so I've been here a little bit over a year. And Chief Gerace, he contacted the director here, Rob Warden, asked if we would be interested in doing some form of evaluation. And he came to me with it, so I decided to go ahead. And I honestly had a lot of fun doing it. I got to do a bunch of ride-alongs with the patrol officers, do interviews with sergeants, got to see the TDGs or tactical decision games in action and watch patrol briefings. So it was really cool to experience it more firsthand than through reading about it.
So Chief, walk us through what these, the last time you were on, we talked about training, and we've talked numerous times on this podcast with other folks just about really, just be very frank, just kind of how antiquated and just how crappy, quite honestly, just law enforcement training is around the country. And one area that I think is finally gaining some attention, I think you've taken it, well, I don't think you have taken it to a whole new level, is making every day a training day, essentially using that time in roll call or in briefing or whatever your department calls it, and actually do something with it. As I've joked for years now, most roll calls or briefings are 30 minutes long. We spend 4 minutes talking about police stuff, and then we spend 26 minutes complaining about things we have no control over, or whatever, the weather, the color of the carpet, the paint on the walls, just things we're never going to fix. And that's just really valuable time where you can, reinforce stuff, if you will, with your officers. So you reached out to the Finn Institute, and before we started recording, there's a push right now to kind of talk about being able to kind of quantify, if you will, what you did. And it sounds like you've done that. So why don't we just turn it over to you and just kind of walk us through what these trainings look like, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of it.
Yeah, man, you got it right. Our police training is not great generally across the board as a profession, right? It doesn't translate into operational improvements. And I think you and Mike, we believe we're doing our guys and girls in blue a disservice if we don't give them the tools to succeed out there. And so we wanted to grab onto that briefing time because much like you, it's being wasted. And what can we do, and what should we do in that briefing? And so the first part we wanted to work on was decision-making, like helping our officers, because we had a kind of a saying, what gets cops in trouble is not the marksmanship, and that's a metaphor, but it's the decision-making that they made at the call in question, right? When we have a bad outcome, it goes back to, why did you do that? Why did they do that? And so we focused originally on trying to do these tactical decision games. They were born from the idea from the military that you could have these discussion with a team, your group, or think of your squad, your roll call squad or your shift. And hey, if we got this call tomorrow, well, let's give us a scenario, an old-fashioned whiteboard scenario. What would you do? What should we do? And those kinds of questions. I think what's really helpful for everybody is one of the examples. I thought this was a great example, and one of our sergeants came up with it. And I don't know if Scott and Mike, do you guys have public transport buses in your jurisdictions? Was there public transportation?
We do. Yeah, we're the last stop south from the Detroit area.
Okay. So you're familiar. We have a number of public transportation buses that come through. So the question was, all right, here it is. Your officers are dispatched to a call. There's a person on a bus, and the group of teenagers got on, and one of those teenagers, they thought they saw the imprint of a handgun under their shirt. It wasn't displayed. They didn't take it out. But you're getting this 911 call from somebody on the bus. And so we had absolutely no idea as a leadership team how we wanted our people to respond to that kind of a call, much less. And then what it got us thinking is like, well, what are they actually going to do? And we started asking them. It was all over the place. You'd have 30 different ideas. Would pull the bus over, felony stop the bus, wait, just do nothing, let the people get off the bus. It was all kinds of wild stuff. But the idea behind these decision games is to help form some sort of team or game knowledge that you as a department want your team to do, and just trying to get everybody on the same page. That was the first idea. And then we did two other parts. So that was part one of the training. Part two was just actual skills. So can they manipulate their taser appropriately? Can they actually put a tourniquet on themselves or their partner? Do they know how to do CPR of a child? That one was done intentionally, because who can argue with having to do CPR on a child, right? So they're not going to argue with me on that one. And then the other part to the training was just declarative knowledge. Do they know their department policies? Do they know procedures? Like, I'm sure you guys, procedural justice was a big push in New York State. And we say we're a procedurally just agency. We engage in procedural justice. Can our people even define what that means? And what you find is the answer to that is no, they really can't. And so what we wanted to know is, if we did some of these things weekly, if we had a decision-making game, would that improve their decision-making process? Or at the very least, did they feel more confident, the younger officers, in what they were going to go face with those tactical decision games? If we gave them the skills to practice, did they actually get better at them? And if we asked them to declare things out loud, important department policies or processes, could they actually do that if they practiced it in briefing? Did they get any better? And so we partnered with the Finn Institute, and Sara was my partner here, but we baselined the employees. I'll let her explain what that means. But we showed up unannounced in August and tested them on the skills, which you can imagine how well that went over. I spent some chief capital there. And then we gave them a test on some declarative knowledge, but that gave us, Sara, a baseline. But I'll let her kind of jump in on why that baseline was important, and then what we ended up finding from some of this stuff.
Yeah. So we need a baseline to see if there's improvements. That's the main reason. But so we did pre-test and post-tests for both the knowledge segment and the critical skills. And for both, there were a lot of very significant improvements. The active recall knowledge test score went from an average of about 50% to an average of over 80% among the whole department. And then I know the critical skills did it where in the beginning it was majority still needed improvement. And by the end, I think over half, probably more, were considered masters of it, and very little still needed improvement. So it seemed like, I think, repetition through repetition, when you're having to do the same thing over and over again, it really helps with memorization and remembering how to do that.
So, Chief, I want to ask you real quick. Sorry, Mike. real quick, I just want to ask you. So I want to get like into the very specifics. So you've got you've got this scenario where a guy gets on a bus and he's got the outline of a gun in his waistband. And what are you going to do? So if I understood you correctly, how did you bring that scenario into roll call?
So yeah, well, that scenario alone, when we couldn't answer it as a leadership team, made us have to do some work. So we're like, if none of us know with 20 something years of experience, how we actually want that thing handled, that has all kinds of repercussions just generally for
Sure.
your department, right?
Yeah, right.
Because it's easy. You get on the bus, he takes a hostage. Well, that cop's an idiot. He shouldn't have done that.
Right.
Or you let him get off the bus and he runs and you got a foot chase and he escapes. Well, you shouldn't have done that. You should have got on the bus. So just practicing that with ourselves showed us how far we had to go. But
So this isn't, I'm sorry, real quick.
Yeah.
This isn't a command staff meeting. I just want the listeners to know like
Yes.
how this actually comes to fruition.
Yep.
So you're just sitting around a command staff meeting and this scenario gets brought up and you're like, holy crap, what are we going to do? We don't know amongst ourselves. So then you take it and now you do what with it?
Yeah, so that one example was in a training of our command staff in how to actually conduct these things. This was just one that we came up with and we didn't even know what we were going to do. But generally, what the decision games that you're referring to, how do you actually bring it into briefing? So once you create these scenarios, and we did it with Shadowbox training. So it's John Schmidt and Gary Klein's group. They have a research arm. They are focused solely on how to improve decision-making in tense, time-starved type environments, policing really. And they came up with the way of delivering these games. They're scenarios, right? But what a sergeant would do, how it would work in practice, is the sergeants helped create these. The bus one was one of the ones that they created. We did get improvement on what we actually wanted to have. We ended up having to do a lot more work on that. And we had to partner with the bus company to talk to them. What are your policies? What are your procedures? But to answer your question, Scott, a sergeant will go in front of the briefing group. They will read a STEM, a short idea of, hey, it's 3:00 in the afternoon. You get a call for an armed, barricaded domestic situation. They'll kind of describe the house. They might put up behind you on a screen the outlay of the neighborhood, just a really low resolution map. And then, okay, you're the first responding officer. And the sergeant would literally just pose those questions. You're the first responding officer. What are your considerations? What would you do? And then somebody would answer, and then they'd kind of flip it to the next guy. Well, yeah, that's what he was going to do. Do you agree with that? Or would you do something different? And then, well, hey, I would be more concerned about parking down the road instead of in front of the house. You know, he didn't mention that. I think how we would approach it, I'd come from the north. And it led to like a real rich tactical discussion as to how you're going to safely approach situations, what resources the department has. Like, would you want to stage EMS? How would you do that? When's it appropriate to make those calls? So hopefully that gives you a little bit more context to how these are actually delivered.
Yeah, it does.
So does your sergeant have a cheat sheet if they're not, eliciting all this information to kind of drive that conversation? Or, there's a lot of legwork in this. Before you went September to when till November, is that when you said?
So we did the evaluation September to December, but we began teaching and training and creating these things in March of.
I was going to say, I mean, the amount of scenarios in training you're going to have to come up to, that's a lot of legwork there.
So what we did, though, the beauty of it is we had the sergeants create them themselves. So they had a voice in the process. So they developed them. And what you ended up finding was they took a number of calls that actually happened in Colony, and then they worked with each other on their shifts. Hey, what do you think about this one? How would this work? Should we make this? And before you know it, a number of them coming in contact with each other had a hand or a say in the creation. So they all had some familiarity with them. The guy that created it knew it better, but they spent a little bit of time of reviewing them. And really though, once you get the skill of facilitation down, you don't need that. It takes a little while. That's a skill to get. But once you learn how to facilitate it, really all they're asking is trying to drive a conversation with people inside the room. What would you do? What are you thinking? How would you go about doing this? And ultimately, these decision games were what our focus was originally, and they became the hardest thing to actually evaluate from a program standpoint. But I think, Sarah, if I have it right, 9 out of 10 officers with less than 10 years on the job, I think I have that right, felt more confident in their job duties after having gone through this process. They felt like they had some more familiarity with experience and thinking these things through with their coworkers. Did I frame that right? Is that a fair representation of what you learned?
Yeah. Sorry, couldn't unmute myself for a second. Yeah, that's right. It was about 9 and 10 said they had more confidence. And even though it's decision making, it's really hard to measure in a research sense in general. But I do think it's important to highlight the downstream benefits of increased confidence, because when you have more confidence, you have more confidence because you have a greater ability to interpret the situation that's happening around you. And so increasing the confidence can be like an indirect effect of better decision making, even though we can't necessarily measure decision making, whether or not they're making the quote unquote correct decisions. But just through learning from more experienced officers, having the chance to talk through what they're thinking in a safe environment does have like direct impacts on their field work, I think.
So I want to go back. So I'm stuck on the bus scenario, which I think is a phenomenal scenario, by the way. And now I'm thinking all the stuff that I should have done in roll call trainings, but nonetheless. So Sarah, if I'm getting this right, because I want the folks listening to like really understand what this looks like so they can take this back to their agency. So the sergeant's going over asking the question about the guy with the outline of the gun on the bus. And all these different answers are bouncing around in roll call. Sarah, are you in roll call for this part? Are you hearing these responses?
Not for every single one that they did, but there were a few that I got to sit in on, yes.
Okay. So then again, we'll just play along here and let's just say you were not in the one for the bus. How then do you go and evaluate whether or not they retained that information from that actual training? Did that question come out as confusing as I said it?
I think I get what you mean.
Okay.
I could not distinguish what they learned from each individual scenario unless, I were to try to talk to them right after, like a week later, and say, hey, what do you remember from this specific scenario? But we tried to measure that through survey responses. So whether they felt like they learned something from the TDGs, or we asked individually what they felt like they took the most impact from or the most benefit from in each component. And for the most part, patrol officers indicated that they benefited the most from the decision games compared to the critical skills and the active knowledge recall. But surprisingly, the sergeants felt like it was the critical skills that was the most beneficial. But I also do think that's just because decision making isn't directly observable. So it was more about that it's kind of self-reporting on if they feel like it helped them in their decision making, and that could maybe later be empirically tested in a more quantitative form, but as of now
Yeah,
it
and
has to be more.
I think that's exactly where I was going was you did the trainings in the roll call. You then asked them through a survey how they feel about it, and it sounds like, hey, this was positive. So I think we can all agree that the more training, the better. I guess the next step then is how do we verify that it actually worked? I mean, we might feel like it. So I guess maybe, Chief, it's like, since this has happened, have you seen a reduction in, I don't know, use of force, citizens' complaints? Have you done body cams and you're seeing better decision making in the field? Like, how are we tracking it now post what you've already done?
Yeah, so very, very hard, kind of what Sarah was hinting on the decision-making component. But I want to draw back to you that there were 3 parts to this briefing training program, and 2 of which you can measure really, really empirically and get solid data on. One, if you ask them flashcard type questions repeatedly, they're going to start to memorize the answers. But like Sarah said, nobody really liked doing that, right? So that has a place where it's placed, I don't know. But the other one that the sergeants reported was the most beneficial was the critical skills. And what that was actually having them manipulate a tool in briefing or performing an action. And we measured their performance on that in August, and then we measured it again in December. And the idea is if they're on a barricade, one of these domestic barricades or something, or an EDP, and they have the less lethal tool, if they're struggling with that tool, they don't actually know how to use it, because we know in training, we showed them one time at 1 8-hour range in service. They're nervous as can be with trying to load this less lethal tool. They're not focused on the door. They're not looking where we want them to look. So the idea behind that was, if they practice with these tools in briefing in a safe space where they can ask questions, they can, break it apart, move it around, in a safe fashion. If they do that, does that free up their cognitive resources to focus more appropriately on the task at hand? And the measurements that we did for that one, Sara can go into it, but their level of mastery on manipulating the tools, the taser, the tourniquet, the pepper ball, the 40 millimeter, all these things we gave them far improved. To answer your question about the empirical stuff with decision making, really, really hard. I haven't found a great way yet. Sara had some ideas that she can share about if you did like a video scenario, could we record their responses, like physically record their responses? And then over time, do their decisions get to be like the expert? So you would have an expert watch the scenario or the decision game, and they would have expert responses. And over time, does your participants get closer? And she can frame that better than I can. That was one way. We didn't do that yet, but that's probably, if some other agency is listening to us and wants to take a stab at that, that's some material that you could work on. But for me, we have a mechanism where we want them to report back to us any calls that match their decision games. And so we've gotten a few. Now they're anecdotal stories, but yes, hey, I report that I was just on this domestic and it was just like one of these ones that we had in a tactical decision game. And I was able to know what we are supposed to do here, or I had some good sense about evacuating or not evacuating the neighbors, those types of things. But Sara, did I frame right about whether or not that would be a way to help measure decision-making improvement over time if we recorded their decisions?
Yeah. Really anything like that. There's been, I can think of like 2 studies that have kind of gone into how are officers making the decisions. But with any study like that, what we're really trying to get an understanding of is what cues are they picking up on? How are they interpreting them? How are their interpretations then driving the actions that they choose? So the way I thought of to do it was, if you had everyone watch a body-worn camera footage of a different officer scenario where there's decision points integrated throughout the video, where pause points, and either do it through a survey of have them write down their response, or I thought of it in the way of, if you could do individual interviews, have them watch videos with a pause point, think out loud as they're watching the video so that you can start to understand their real-time cognition. And then during each pause point, use probing questions to further ask them, like, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? How are you making sense of that? What's are you going to do now? What do you expect to happen next? And then that could form some form of baseline on how they're making these decisions. And you could compare it to officers that are considered experts or just have more experience on the job, and see if they are seeing the same things or if they're interpreting them the same way.
So, Chief, I always say, if you're not measuring something, you can't get better, right? You guys did an outstanding job of kind of understanding and measuring that roll call and that training. So that was September to the end of the year. Where are we today? Are you instituting new roll calls? Is Sara done? Where did it take you?
Yeah, so I learned a bunch, Mike, and I learned that throwing skills, active recall questions, and tactical decision games all every week was a lot. And they wanted me to back off a little bit.
When you say they, are you talking about the older guys?
No, listen, all the guys, they all participated. They all got something, right? I'm not naive, right? Not everybody wants to do this. But we thought it was important. We thought we could make them safer. We thought that they could learn some stuff. So where are we at today? We backed it off to every 2 weeks. So now instead of every week, we have a tactical decision game, or like Sarah said, we did pause point videos with body camera footage, and we just introduced the video would stop after 30 seconds and a question comes up on the briefing screen and it says, "What are you thinking about? What would you do now?" And then they talk it out loud. And the sergeant is the one facilitating that conversation. So that's every 2 weeks. There's one of those, either a decision game, like I explained earlier, or a video where they're thinking things through together. And then there's a skill-based portion where we have a tool every 2 weeks where they have to demonstrate proficiency every 2 weeks. And we just have those on a rotating list. So that way they're hitting some of these tools every month and a half or something like that.
And I can't say how important that is. I remember 20, 25 years ago or so when really the shotgun was the only tool we had. And every Sunday morning, it was dummy rounds, load, unload, tactical reload. And I remember the first time doing it. I remember the first time other people doing it. Oh, nervous. By the end, every week, every 2 weeks. And it's to your point, repetition and confidence means a lot, especially with those tools.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway for anybody listening to us is that you can have a better use of your briefing time. And the easiest thing to implement is those skills, right? That's really easy. You can grab your tools, you can make them safe, and the people in the room can play with them and feel better about it. Self-admittedly, those decision exercises do take a little bit of practice and forethought of how you're going to lay them out. But I think, Scott, to your point, we're not using this time appropriately now. We got to do a better job with it.
Right. Well, I look at it as Sarah was talking about pausing the videos and the different points. I went right to use of force. I went right to citizens complaints. I went right to applying policy. Like I can envision watching a domestic body cam, and as soon as the officer hears the key words that now you have to make an arrest because of the law, like pausing it, like right there, like, hey, where are we at? Or maybe you take a body cam of an officer who ends up getting in a fight with somebody. It doesn't even have to be your department. You can find these online, right? Find a video of an officer, and right before the fight starts, like you hit the pause button and you ask your officers, hey, what did you see? And watch how many of them won't pick up some of the pre-attack indicators that maybe were present. And to everybody's point on this, getting this in front of our officers frequently is critical to driving down officers hurt, officers killed, suspects injured, etc., because it's repetition. We've talked in here before about comparing law enforcement training to a professional athlete and how much training pros get in athletic in different sports compared to the law enforcement. Too many departments around the country are still doing the bare minimum and they're just checking a box. And man, you all have really taken it to the next level. So I just think it's incredible. And it's not, yeah.
It's been good, Scott. And you have to have dosage, right? You have to give them, they have to see it enough. They have to have experiences enough to start to recognize these patterns. Because if you do it as a one-off, it's not.
Yeah, they forget it. They forget it before you're done. They forget a half hour after briefing, when they're like, what was that? That was weird. And then they just go about their day because they don't give any. But you've made it part of your culture. You've made it part of the agency now. Now, you said you've scaled it back a little bit, which is fine, but you're still giving them something every 14 days. It's going to keep it fresh in their mind. In that book right there, Street Survival, they talk about when then thinking. When this happens, then we're going to do this. And that's we preach that in that class when I teach it. You have to be in cops' minds when this occurred. Then we're going to do this. Well, the way that you do that is through this type of training, and with body cams and dash cams being so prevalent as they are today, there's really no excuse to not use your roll calls and your briefings and actually make them something. You know what I mean?
You can, and I think we have to. And it does take a little bit of planning, but it's not insurmountable, and you can make the cheat sheets for the key takeaways. The videos are easy, right? You can play it a little bit. What would we do now? And then the next slide can be whatever the key takeaways were. Like a sergeant can run that. Like you can have this
Right.
facilitated discussion.
Yep.
We did a number of them. Sarah and I did a couple together on, they were acute behavioral emergencies, like in custody death stuff. And how we did it is, what would you do? What are you thinking now? What's going to happen next? And then the next slide after that just was, hey, sit the person up, right? Like remember to say, sit the guy up. Remember to take your weight off. So you can make it a little bit easier on your sergeants if you have a couple of solid people. But if you get a few champions behind these ideas and let the people contribute the content, that's the other thing, Scott, we just did a week ago, well, I shouldn't say a week ago, maybe it was a month ago. I put a memo out asking for the officers now. Mike, this is to answer your question, where are we at? They've seen it from September to December, and they've seen what we've done now with the videos. Now we're asking all individual officers to contribute content to our content library with key takeaways. And they're going to pitch me and my deputy chiefs whatever they came up with in 2 weeks, I think, in 2 weeks. And
Well, that's great. Any crazy call that you see, add it
Yeah.
to the library, right? Share the knowledge.
And it's trying to get to develop some of these patrol officers that want to be sergeants. They want to step up and lead. Okay, well, training is a huge part of being a leader in our department, and I know in your guys. And okay, so step up, put yourself out there, develop something, show some people. I think I have, it's not like I have people beating down my door to participate, but I got I think a half dozen or so guys want to participate and deliver training content. And I think as we use other people's content, they'll see that worked, that everybody's work got recognized. And I think I'll hopefully build more and more people want to contribute to it. So it's not so much work on only a few people.
So, Sarah, let me ask you a question here. You had never dealt with law enforcement prior to this. Was this your first foray into the law enforcement world?
Kind of.
Okay.
My family, I have a lot of law enforcement in my family.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, what was the biggest shock?
Better than having a record.
Yeah. Biggest shock of the law enforcement culture. What did you expect? What did you see? What did you think getting into it? Biggest takeaway.
My biggest takeaway. I would say, I think the more experienced officers have a lot of, I don't know how to say, like a lot of push into how other officers are going to think about situations too. So I think newer officers seem to learn a lot from more experienced officers, and that can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on what they're being taught. That was the biggest thing, was I really got to see how like kind of the officers are socialized into a culture. I don't really believe
You find
in
a lot of informal leaders, right? Even without rank, that have a lot of influence over officers. And your point exactly, it could be great or it could be a bad thing, depending on what it is.
Yeah. So I feel like with Colony, their organizational culture seems very open to training and wanting to help newer officers, which I thought was really, really nice to see. And the more experienced officers seemed like they wanted to better the profession.
And that comes from the top. And that's why he's our first trifecta 3-time attendee on the Two Chiefs, One Mic podcast.
And there it is.
That's it, man. Three. Yeah. So I hope you guys got, what we were driving at, but there is a lot of stuff that you can use. Like, that's why I was jumping out of my chair at the last time we talked, I think before Christmas, with this briefing time, right? You can do stuff there. And to Sarah's point, we anchored on a lot of the senior guys to share. I'm like, if you guys aren't participating in these, this is your chance to shape how the guys and girls that are young backing you up are going to behave. And some of it is so simple. Like there was one, it was like a burglary call that we did one of these tactical decision games, and it was the wife is upstairs. She doesn't know her husband has come home early, but thinks somebody broke into the house. And the officers are talking about having dispatch call her, how are we going to get in touch with her to tell her to come down the stairs, whatever it was. And then one of the senior guys was like, how about you have dispatch say, open the window and have her come to the window. And it was something so simple that only a senior guy would be like, yeah, like cut out all the middle men, cut out all the communication, and somebody go old school and open the window and talk to her yourself.
Work smarter, not harder, courtesy of your senior officers.
Yes, exactly it, man. So it was a really great experience for us, and I'm glad we did it. I'm glad we got some empirical data to show if you practice this stuff and you work on these skills, they actually get better. And that we have. And that was a really, really good point for me to be able to continue to sell this in our agency. Look how much better you got.
Yeah. Well, we've said this before too, you spend more time with the people you work with than you do with your own families. So you should want to make it the best place you can make it. And I think Sara said this earlier, like the person who's going to be backing you up on that call, you want him or her to be the best trained, the best qualified that could possibly show up, especially if your life or life of someone else is dependent upon it. So why would you not want to make everybody around you as good or better than yourself? So you guys are doing good stuff up there in New York. What's the temperature today? It's May 11th. What's the temperature up there in your part of the world?
I don't know. What do we got, Sara?
32 degrees and 4 inches of snow on the ground, or what?
60.
60. Well, it's Mike, what is it in Michigan?
It's probably about 60. It's about 90 in my office right now, though.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so excited to listen to this. We're getting a new station, new build, new roll call room. We don't have that here. We're kind of in a catch-all, so it's exciting to hear this and see the opportunities on the horizon and what we can do with the spaces too that we're going to have. So I love hearing it.
Awesome. Well, listen, Chief, Sara, we appreciate you coming on the program. Chief, we'll put your contact information up on the screen like we did last time. Sara, we'll put the Finn Institute up on the website up at the end. So if folks want to get in touch with you or Chief and find out more, they can do it that way. Any last thoughts? Anything that you want to say before we wrap up? Either one of you?
I would like to say, I do think for anyone that would want to go further with implementing this type of training program, I think the most important thing is you do need to get buy-in from your more senior officers. And I think a good way to do that is to form it in a way of you're mentoring and you're leaving a legacy on the officers that are going to be taking your
Well
spot
said.
eventually. So
Yeah, that's well said.
Yeah, you
Well
nailed
said.
that one.
Yeah, it was good. You've been waiting for that.
I should probably just not say anything, but I think I would say what I would share to the other chiefs is there are research institutions willing to partner, and you can get some good solid data on whatever initiatives, whether it's this training initiative or not, to help you build an evidence base to say why you're doing what you're doing and how is it working, right? Mike, to your point, like, did it work, or is what we're doing having any effect? And so I really appreciate all Sara's work and the Finn Institute's work and what they've done to help me. She was great. She was a great partner to have.
Awesome. Well, Mike, you want to take us home?
Man, I really do appreciate it. And Sara nailed it. And Scott, you've said it over and over. Work smarter, not harder. And to find somebody smarter than you to run it, right? Like the Finn Institute and getting the people to help you out and get this done. You can't get better at things that you don't measure. I say that not only with stats, but with this training. I think it's a perfect example. And you could probably sell these ideas, right? You got a business, people are looking for it, right? But they can reach out to you for ideas. So thank you again for coming on. And the next thing you come up with, you'll be the first 4-time attendee. So we look forward to seeing you again. Sara, Jay, thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you. Take care. All right.